The rain came down in sheets that night, turning the city highway into a dark river of blurred headlights and endless gray. Most people had already pulled over or rushed home. But Catherine Chin didn't have that luxury. Her executive board meeting was scheduled for 8 the next morning, and the quarterly report still sat unfinished on her laptop. She pressed harder on the accelerator, her sleek black sedan cutting through the downpour with precision. Then the engine sputtered. Catherine's hands tightened on the wheel. The dashboard lights flickered once, twice, and then the car jolted forward before losing all power. She guided it to the shoulder, heart pounding, rain hammering against the windows like a warning. She sat there for a moment, staring at the dark road ahead, then pulled out her phone. No signal, of course. She stepped out into the storm, her designer coat soaked within seconds. The cold rain stung her face as she popped the hood, knowing full well she had no idea what she was looking at. Steam rose from the engine. Water dripped from her hair. She stood there, feeling more helpless than she had in years. That's when the headlights appeared. An old pickup truck slowed to a stop behind her car. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He wore a faded denim jacket and work boots, his hair already wet from the rain. He didn't say anything at first, just walked up to the front of her car and looked under the hood with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times before. "Alternator's gone," he said, his voice calm and steady. "You're not going anywhere tonight unless we fix this." Catherine blinked rain out of her eyes. "Can you fix it?" He glanced at her, then back at the engine. "Yeah. Give me 20 minutes. She watched as he moved with quiet efficiency, pulling tools from his truck, working in the rain without complaint. He didn't ask her name, didn't try to make small talk. He just worked. She noticed his hands were calloused, his jacket torn at the shoulder. There was a weariness in his movements, the kind that came from long hours and little rest. "You do this often?" she asked, more to fill the silence than anything else. "When I have to," he replied, not looking up. "Got a kid to feed. Can't afford to turn down side work." Something in his tone made her pause. There was no bitterness, no self-pity, just fact. She found herself watching him more closely, noticing the way he handled each tool with care, the way he checked and double-checked his work before moving to the next step. After what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, he straightened up and wiped his hands on his jeans. "Try it now." She slid back into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life, smooth and strong. Relief flooded through her. She stepped back out, reaching for her purse. "How much do I owe you?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Just glad you're safe." Catherine stared at him. "I can't just." "You don't owe me anything," he said firmly. "Get home safe. That's enough." Before she could argue, he was already walking back to his truck. She stood there in the rain, watching his taillights disappear into the storm, feeling strangely unsettled. She didn't even know his name. The next morning, Catherine arrived at her office earlier than usual. She had showered, changed into a sharp gray suit, and reviewed the quarterly reports twice. The board meeting was critical. They were discussing a potential partnership with a new investor, someone who had remained anonymous throughout the negotiations. Her brother, Marcus, had been pushing hard for the deal, but Catherine had her reservations. The terms were too favorable, the investor too secretive. She walked into the boardroom at exactly 8 o'clock. The other executives were already seated. Marcus sat at the far end, his expression smug. He had been trying to undermine her authority for months, questioning her decisions, whispering to the other board members behind her back. He wanted her position. She knew that, but she had fought too hard to let him take it. "Good morning," she said, taking her seat at the head of the table. "Let's begin." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Actually, Catherine, we're still waiting for someone." She frowned. "Who?" "Our new investor. He requested to attend this meeting personally." Catherine's jaw tightened. "You didn't think to inform me of this beforehand?" Marcus smiled. "It was a last-minute decision. I'm sure you'll understand once you meet him." The door opened. Catherine looked up, ready to greet whoever walked in with the polite professionalism she had perfected over years of corporate battles. But the moment she saw his face, the words died in her throat. It was him, the man from the rain, the one who had fixed her car, the one she had assumed was just a struggling mechanic trying to make ends meet. He stood in the doorway now, dressed in a tailored navy suit, his damp work boots replaced by polished leather shoes. His hair was neatly combed, his expression calm and unreadable, but it was unmistakably him. Their eyes met across the room, and for a split second, she saw recognition flicker in his gaze. Then it was gone, replaced by the same quiet composure he had shown on the highway. Marcus stood, extending his hand. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce Daniel Reese. He's the founder of Reese Capital and the investor we've been negotiating with for the past 3 months. Daniel shook Marcus's hand briefly, then turned his attention to the rest of the room. "Thank you for having me," he said, his voice the same steady tone she remembered. "I'm looking forward to working with you." Catherine forced herself to breathe. She had spent the entire morning preparing for this meeting, but nothing could have prepared her for this. The man she had dismissed as just another stranger on the side of the road was now sitting across from her, holding the future of her company in his hands. Marcus gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Please sit." Daniel's gaze shifted to Catherine. "Actually, I'd prefer to sit here." He moved to the chair directly across from her, his expression neutral but deliberate. Catherine felt the weight of every eye in the room. She couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. Not in front of Marcus. She straightened her shoulders and met Daniel's gaze head-on. "Mr. Reese, welcome. I understand you've been in discussions with my brother regarding a potential partnership." "That's correct," Daniel replied, "though I've also been doing my own research on the company. I wanted to understand who I'd be working with before making any final decisions." Marcus leaned forward. "And we're confident that once you see our projections—" "I've already seen the projections," Daniel interrupted smoothly. "What I'm more interested in is leadership, vision, integrity." His eyes never left Catherine's. "Those aren't things you find in a spreadsheet." Catherine felt her pulse quicken. Was he testing her? Or was this something else entirely? "Then what exactly are you looking for, Mr. Reese?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "I'm looking for someone who knows the difference between power and responsibility. Someone who doesn't just make decisions from behind a desk." He paused. "Someone who understands what it's like to get their hands dirty." The silence in the room was thick. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The other executives exchanged confused glances. But Catherine understood. He wasn't just talking about business. He was talking about last night, about the rain, about the choice she had made to step out of her car and try to fix the problem herself, even when she didn't know how. "I believe," Catherine said carefully, "that real leadership means being willing to do whatever it takes to move forward, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you're out of your depth." Daniel's expression softened, just barely. "I agree." Marcus cleared his throat loudly. "That's all very poetic. But let's get to the actual terms of the partnership. Daniel, you mentioned wanting a seat on the board. I think that's more than reasonable given your investment." Catherine's head snapped toward her brother. "A board seat? That wasn't part of the original proposal." Marcus smiled. "Things change, Catherine. We need to be flexible." "Flexible is one thing," Catherine replied, her voice hardening. "Reckless is another. Giving up a board seat means giving up control. That's not something I'm willing to do without a full review." "Then maybe," Marcus said, his tone sharp, "you're not the right person to be making that decision." The room went still. It was the most direct challenge Marcus had ever made to her authority, and he had chosen to do it in front of their most important potential investor. Catherine felt the anger rise in her chest, but she forced it down. Losing her temper now would only prove Marcus right. Before she could respond, Daniel spoke. "Actually, I'm not interested in a board seat." Everyone turned to look at him. Marcus's smile faltered. "What? I'm interested in a partnership," Daniel continued, his gaze fixed on Catherine. "Not control. I don't invest in companies to take them over. I invest in people I believe in. And right now, I'm only interested in working with one person in this room. Catherine's breath caught. He was choosing her. Publicly. In front of everyone. Marcus's face flushed red. That's not how business works. That's exactly how my business works, Daniel said calmly. And if that's a problem, I can walk away right now. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine could feel the shift in the room. Marcus had overplayed his hand, and everyone knew it. She looked at Daniel, searching his expression for any hint of a game, any sign that this was just another power play. But all she saw was the same quiet resolve he had shown on the highway. Mr. Reese, she said slowly, I think we should continue this conversation privately. Daniel nodded. I'd prefer that. Catherine stood, ignoring the stunned looks from the other executives. This meeting is adjourned. Marcus, I'll expect a full report on your communications with Mr. Reese by the end of the day. She didn't wait for a response. She simply walked out of the room, knowing Daniel would follow. They ended up in her office, the door closed behind them. Catherine crossed her arms, leaning against her desk. You could have told me who you were last night. Daniel stood near the window, his hands in his pockets. Would it have changed anything? It would have changed everything, she said. I wouldn't have. She stopped herself. Wouldn't have what? Daniel asked, turning to face her. Treated me like a person? Assumed I was beneath you. Catherine flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? Daniel took a step closer. You didn't ask my name. You didn't offer yours. You saw a man on the side of the road and assumed you knew exactly who he was. He paused. I did the same thing when I walked into that boardroom. I saw a CEO and assumed I knew who you were. But I was wrong. Catherine swallowed hard. Then why are you here? Why invest in my company? Because last night you didn't stay in your car, Daniel said quietly. You got out. You tried to fix it yourself, even though you had no idea what you were doing. That told me more about you than any board meeting ever could. She stared at him, her chest tight. So this is some kind of test? No, Daniel said. This is me choosing to trust someone who doesn't quit when things get hard. Someone who doesn't hide behind their title. He held her gaze. I'm not interested in your company, Catherine. I'm interested in you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Catherine felt her heart hammering in her chest. This wasn't just about business anymore. Maybe it never had been. I don't know if I can trust you, she admitted. Then let me prove it, Daniel said. No board seat, no control, just a partnership. On your terms. Catherine looked at him for a long moment, weighing the risk, weighing the choice. Then slowly she nodded. All right, but if you betray that trust. I won't, Daniel said firmly. And somehow, standing there in the quiet of her office with the rain still streaking down the windows, Catherine believed him. Over the following weeks, Daniel became a constant presence in Catherine's professional life. He attended meetings, reviewed strategies, and offered insights that were sharp, practical, and surprisingly empathetic. He understood the weight of responsibility because he carried it himself. He had built his investment firm from nothing, working 2 jobs to support his daughter after his wife passed away. The people at Reese Capital weren't just employees to him. They were people he had fought for, just like Catherine fought for hers. But it wasn't just his business acumen that unsettled her. It was the way he saw through her armor. The way he called her out when she pushed too hard, when she sacrificed too much, when she forgot to take care of herself. He never did it cruelly. He just reminded her, quietly, that strength didn't mean never breaking. One late evening, after a particularly brutal negotiation with a supplier, Catherine found herself still at her desk long after everyone else had gone home. She was exhausted, her eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets, her head pounding from stress. She didn't hear Daniel come in until he set a cup of tea down in front of her. You're still here, he said. She looked up, startled. So are you. He smiled faintly. Fair point. He gestured to the empty chair across from her. Mind if I sit? She shook her head. He sat down, leaning back in the chair, studying her with that same calm intensity she had come to recognize. You don't have to do this alone, you know, he said. Catherine frowned. Do what? Carry everything. Prove yourself over and over. Burn yourself out trying to be perfect. She looked away. You don't understand. I think I do, Daniel said quietly. You think if you stop, even for a second, someone will take it all away. Your position, your respect, your company. So you keep moving, keep fighting, because stopping feels like losing. Catherine's throat tightened. She hated how easily he saw through her. And what if they do take it away? Then you rebuild, Daniel said simply. Just like you've done before. Just like I did. She met his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to pretend. It's exhausting. I know, Daniel said softly. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. Something in his voice made her chest ache. She wanted to believe him, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not yet. Why do you care? She asked. Daniel hesitated, then leaned forward, resting his arms on the desk. Because I see you, Catherine. Not the CEO. Not the title. You. And I think you deserve someone in your corner who isn't waiting for you to fail. Catherine felt her breath catch. She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just nodded, her fingers wrapping around the warm cup of tea. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel stood, his expression gentle. Get some rest. Tomorrow's another fight. He left her office, and Catherine sat there in the silence, staring at the tea, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. But hope was fragile, and Marcus was not the kind of man who gave up easily. A week later, Catherine was blindsided. She arrived at the office to find an emergency board meeting already in session. Marcus hadn't informed her, hadn't even called. She walked into the room to find him standing at the head of the table, presenting a proposal to remove her as CEO. You've all seen the reports, Marcus said smoothly. Catherine's leadership has been erratic. She's made unilateral decisions without board approval. She's allowed personal relationships to cloud her judgment. He glanced at Daniel, who sat silently in the corner, his expression unreadable. And now she's brought in an outside investor without proper vetting. Catherine's hands clenched into fists. That's a lie. Marcus smiled. Is it? You gave Daniel Reese access to confidential company information. You made promises on behalf of this board without consulting us. And you expect us to just trust your judgment. One of the board members, an older man named Gregory, cleared his throat. Catherine, is this true? No, Catherine said firmly. Marcus is twisting the facts. Daniel was vetted. The partnership was reviewed by legal. Every decision I made was in the best interest of this company. Then why? Marcus said, pulling out a folder. Do I have emails showing that you and Daniel have been meeting privately, discussing strategy without board oversight? Catherine's stomach dropped. He had been spying on her, tracking her communications. She looked at Daniel, who met her gaze with a steady calm that somehow anchored her. Those meetings, Daniel said, standing up, were at my request, and they were entirely professional. I wanted to understand the company's culture before finalizing my investment. Catherine was transparent, thorough, and entirely appropriate in every interaction. He turned to Marcus. What I want to know is why you've been so eager to undermine her from the start. Marcus's jaw tightened. I'm protecting this company. You're protecting your ego, Daniel said bluntly. You want her position. You've wanted it since the day she was promoted over you. And now you're using me as an excuse to take it. The room went silent. Gregory looked between Marcus and Catherine, his expression troubled. Is this true, Marcus? Marcus's face flushed. This is absurd. It's not, Catherine said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Marcus has been working against me for months, spreading rumors, questioning my decisions, turning the board against me. And now he's fabricated a crisis to justify a coup. I have done no such thing, Marcus snapped. Then explain this, Daniel said, pulling out his phone. He projected an email onto the screen. It was from Marcus to a rival company. offering to sell confidential information in exchange for a position on their board. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. The room erupted. Gregory stood, his face red with anger. Marcus, what is this? Marcus's composure shattered. That's taken out of context. There is no context, Daniel said coldly. That makes this acceptable. Catherine felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. She had known Marcus resented her, but she hadn't realized how far he was willing to go. Gregory turned to Catherine. I owe you an apology. We all do. Catherine nodded slowly. I appreciate that, but I want Marcus removed from this company. Immediately, Marcus stared at her, his expression a mix of shock and fury. You can't do this. I can, Catherine said quietly. And I am. Security escorted Marcus out of the building that afternoon. The board issued a formal apology and reaffirmed Catherine's position as CEO. Daniel stayed late, helping her sort through the aftermath, making calls, reviewing legal documents. They worked side by side in her office until the city lights blurred outside the windows. Finally, Catherine leaned back in her chair, exhausted. Thank you, she said, for everything. Daniel looked at her, his expression soft. You didn't need me. You would have handled it. Maybe, Catherine admitted, but it would have been a lot harder alone. Daniel smiled faintly. Good thing you're not alone anymore. Catherine felt something shift in her chest. She had spent so long building walls, protecting herself, refusing to let anyone close. But Daniel had walked through every defense without even trying. He had seen her at her worst and stayed. He had trusted her when no one else did. And now, sitting here in the quiet aftermath of the storm, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want him to leave. Daniel, she said softly, why did you really invest in my company? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his eyes meeting hers. Because when I saw you standing in the rain, trying to fix that car, I saw someone who didn't give up, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. And I thought to myself, that's the kind of person I want to fight for. Catherine's throat tightened. That's not a business decision. No, Daniel agreed. It's not. He paused. But it's the truth. Catherine felt her walls crack, just a little. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Trust someone, she whispered. Let someone in. I've spent so long protecting myself that I don't even know if I remember how. Daniel reached across the desk, his hand covering hers. Then we'll figure it out together. No rush, no expectations. Just us. Catherine looked down at their hands, feeling the warmth of his touch, the steadiness of his presence. And for the first time in years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry everything alone. Okay, she whispered. Daniel smiled. Okay. 3 months later, Catherine stood in front of the board once again. But this time, she wasn't fighting for her position. She was presenting the company's best quarterly results in 5 years. Revenue was up. Partnerships were thriving. Employee morale had never been higher. And at the back of the room, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and a small smile on his face, was Daniel. After the meeting, they walked out of the building together. The rain had started again, light and steady, turning the streets into rivers of reflected light. Catherine stopped under the awning, looking up at the gray sky. You know, she said, I used to hate the rain. Daniel stepped beside her. And now, Catherine smiled. Now I think it's just another reason to keep moving. Daniel laughed softly. That's very CEO of you. She looked at him, her expression warm. Or maybe it's just very me. He reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. Yeah, maybe it is. They stood there in the rain, not saying anything, just being. And Catherine realized that this, right here, was the thing she had been searching for all along. Not control, not perfection, just someone who saw her, really saw her, and stayed anyway. Thank you, she said quietly. Daniel frowned. For what? For fixing my car that night. He smiled. Anytime. And as the rain fell around them, Catherine knew that whatever came next, whatever battles lay ahead, she wouldn't face them alone. Because sometimes the people who change your life aren't the ones who promise you the world. They're the ones who show up in the rain, fix what's broken, and quietly remind you that you were never meant to do it all alone. If you've ever felt like you had to prove yourself alone, drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. If the story made you feel something real, hit that like button. It reminds me why I keep telling these stories. And if you believe in people who show up when it matters most, subscribe. Because every story here is about finding strength, respect, and connection in the most unexpected places.